Welcome to Beyond the Next Chapter. I am your host, Whitney Clark, and we love to celebrate firsts around here. And today, for the first time on the podcast, we have an author who's out with a new YA book. We've never featured the author of a YA book before, and she's a local, which we also love. So joining me today is Hailey Alcaraz. She's a Mexican-American author out with a new book called Rosa by Any Other Name. She was born in California, but raised right here in Arizona and loves to write about multicultural Latinx characters, and in particular, young women who are finding themselves in the world. We've all been through it. Maybe we still are, even as adults. Her young adult debut, Up in Flames, was published in 2023. Not to mention, she's an author, also a mom and a dog mom. We're not going to leave the dogs out.
Thank you.
Hailey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is also my first podcast ever. So it's first.
We love it. We love the firsts. Okay, so Rosa by Any Other Name. Tell readers what to expect. Let's talk a little bit about what the book's about.
Yeah, I pitch it as West Side Story meets The Hate U Give. So it is a loose Romeo and Juliet retelling set here in 1955 Phoenix. I hesitate to call it a retelling because it's almost like a Romeo and Juliet sequel. The death of my Romeo and Juliet, Ramon and Julianne, happens in the first third, and it's not a spoiler. It's an official synopsis. So the focus of my book deals with the aftermath, how the community reckons with this tragedy, and how my main character, Rosa, who is loosely based off Rosalind in the original, navigates her grief and the community action that it inspires. The source of this book was like the closing lines of Romeo and Juliet. The prince kind of comes and like surveys the damage, and he's like, all right, like we're all gonna be peaceful now. And I just thought that was like BS, you know. I thought is that really how that would transpire, or would there be some really complex things to happen? So this book seeks to navigate what happens when something really tragic happens to young people that impacts multiple sides of our community.
Let's talk a little bit about Rosa. What is Rosa like?
Rosa is very quiet and bookish. She is Mexican-American, but she is white passing, which comes from a lot of my own identity. So she is able to attend the white school, which at this time was North High School, or in 1955, it was still called North Phoenix. So schools weren't legally required to, or schools were legally desegregated at this time. This is like the first year after Brown versus Board of Education passed. But obviously there was still some prejudice that dictated where students went. So most of the white students in Phoenix attended North Phoenix High School, and a lot of students of color attended South Mountain High School. So Rosa uses her fair skin to go to North with the hopes of going to college. She is an aspiring journalist, and so she's hoping to go to Arizona State University, which at the time was Arizona State College. When tragedy strikes, and she's kind of forced out of her bookish, introverted, very goal-oriented path to speak out on behalf of two people that she cares about deeply, and this community that she loves and is proud of, but has very conflicted feelings towards, given like the state of the world and prejudice and racism at that time.
And one of her best friends, Ramon. Talk a little bit about Ramon and who kind of inspired his character.
Yeah, Ramon is my Romeo. And she and Ramon were childhood best friends, pretty much from their entire lives. He is kind of like a whimsical character. He likes music. He doesn't seem to take school very seriously. He's very romantic. He's had multiple girlfriends that are alluded to. People always kind of thought he and Rosa would hit it off, although it never really transpired in that way. So when at first he tells her that he has fallen in love with Julianne, she kind of writes him off. She's like, you've been in love with 1,000 people. Like, this is not worth the risk. Like, let's move on. And obviously he doesn't.
And Julianne, tell us about Julianne, because she's also sort of Rosa's kind of best friend at school, but doesn't know the real her, at least to start in the book.
Exactly. Julianne is like Rosa's pretty much her only friend at North at the beginning of the book. She is also the daughter of the sheriff, who is kind of this iconic figure in the book, and he's a political leader. People really admire and respect him for being like a straight shooter, and that reputation kind of comes into some interesting discourse through the wake of what happens. But she looks like the American sweetheart. You know, she's blonde, blue eyes, she's a cheerleader, but she's got kind of this firebrand tendency underneath, where she is constantly kind of pushing the edges of what's expected for girls of her time. So her whirlwind romance with Ramon is very in line with kind of her desire to do things a little bit differently than it's expected of her.
The book is set in the 50s, but what I love about it is you talk about real places, real communities that once existed in Phoenix. And I found myself wanting to learn more and researching this and talking about it with my husband. Tell me a little bit about the Golden Gate community in particular, where Ramon and Rosa live.
So Golden Gate was in South Phoenix, and it was a really rural, kind of like vibrant, lush community. It was mostly farmlands. It was located where Sky Harbor's rental car terminal is now. So it was destroyed through eminent domain in the 70s. And all that stands is today, I believe, is the Sacred Heart Church, where Rosa and her friends go for these community organizing groups. The church is currently vacant. I believe they are fundraising to try and turn it into a cultural center. But it was this really tight-knit Latin community. Not many pictures remain, but I have stumbled across people who grew up there and remembered it, or they have pictures from their families. Either just I happened upon them at work functions, or I found them online, and I was like, can I please see pictures of what this looked like? And they all remember it very beautifully as like a very lush kind of oasis. It was before South Phoenix was part of Phoenix proper. So it was kind of just like its own little bubble. That seems to be remembered really fondly.
You can find information, if you look up the Golden Gate community or the Sacred Heart Church, there's been news articles about it in the past. How difficult was it, though, for you to find historical information about this place?
Quite. Luckily, I really enjoy the research aspect of this genre in general. I got very deep into rabbit holes. There are some really cool sources, like the City of Phoenix Historic Preservation had some cool maps of what all the neighborhoods of South Phoenix were. The Rogue columnist, he runs a blog where he shows pictures, and he had some really cool gems. I mentioned both of those sources in my acknowledgments. Yeah, it was challenging. There's a lot of photo books of historical Phoenix that I bought and looked through, and of Central and North Phoenix, thousands of really great images. But of South Phoenix, they were really hard to come by. So I both relied on just these very niche sources, but also just my imagination to try and create this image that was based off historical artifacts, but wanted to come alive for the readers.
Tell me about the person in your life who helped inspire this story that you got to talk to and is part of this book as well.
Yeah, this book is dedicated to my dad. He is my Mexican parent, and where a lot of my cultural background comes from. And the idea for the story started with just stories of his Hispanic neighborhood. He grew up in Southern California in Chula Vista. And so I wanted to write a story that kind of captured some of the tone and themes and difficulties of his childhood. But I knew I wanted to focus my story in Arizona just because I don't feel like there are that many Arizona stories, especially during this time period. And then I also drew on some of the stories that my best friend's mother, Margarita, shared. I asked her a lot of questions of what do you remember eating for breakfast? Or how did you guys make your coffee? I wanted to capture those little details. My story falls a little bit before both their childhoods. But just to kind of get some of those cultural details that I just don't feel like I would have access to otherwise.
And it's funny you say that about breakfast, because when I was reading this, I was like, wow, this detail is so incredible. She's talking about what they had for breakfast and what her mom was making. So what were some of the things that they told you that were really special to them back then?
Yeah, lots of eggs, lots of tortillas, lots of beans. They said that beans were their main protein because it was affordable, it was easy, it was delicious. And I believe I have a scene where he's making instant coffee, and that is copy and paste from my dad's childhood. They always drink instant coffees. I always remember that. And I do in the gatherings from when we were little, when all my dad's family was together, they were making the instant coffee. And so that was really important to me. I was Rosa's family definitely drinks instant coffee. I know it.
What was your favorite part of writing this book?
The historical discovery. I am a history nerd. I got to go to a lot of museums to dig into it. I loved pulling up these very obscure academic articles, emailing the professors my follow-up questions. I just found that very rewarding, and I wish Phoenix were better with its historic preservation, and so that kind of just inspired me to keep digging further and to better understand this place that I've lived for most of my life.
Yeah. So you have 2 young children. And you have another job, as a writing is your job, but then you have another actual 9-to-5 job. How are you able to do all of this?
Yeah. I drink a lot of coffee. Yeah. I I'm very lucky that my job is super supportive.
Okay.
I have very flexible hours, and they're excited for me. So that helps a
awesome.
lot. I have a very wide village, so grandparents and aunts and uncles who lean in and help with childcare, as well as my husband. But yeah, this is something that I've always wanted to do. So I'm very intentional in carving out time. And, like right now, my book just came out earlier this month. So like August is book month. So like I may not be doing some of my other priorities as much as I am in August, but like I'll take a step back and focus on other things. So I think being intentional about that, but also my mom is a writer. She has written several romantic suspense novels, and I remember seeing her do it my entire childhood. She worked full time the entire time. She actually was taking classes at ASU for a good chunk of it too. I to this day don't know how she did all of it. And so I just knew that it was possible, and like I had a template of like, okay, she was able to do it, and like she survived, and I was healthy and loved and cared for at the end. So like it obviously made a big impact on me. So if my girls can see me doing the same thing, whether they want to write books or whatever it is they want to do, that's also very important to me.
I love that. And I've heard from so many authors that, it's just, maybe it's an hour a day, maybe it's 2 hours a day, maybe it's no hours one day. I mean, you just make it happen when it's something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, I always push back on the advice that you have to write every single day, because I do not.
Yeah.
Like I write when I can, and like maybe I'll go through a month where I write every single day, but then I will take like a month off, or maybe I'll only write once a week. And, I think especially as like a working mother, like that is something that like I just have to embrace, and like there's no piece of advice that works for everybody. So you got to figure out what works for you.
Totally, I bet. When did you first fall in love with writing and knew that this is what you wanted to do?
I've written for literally as long as I can remember. My first like official gig, I was a Time for Kids reporter in 6th grade. I think I was like the first class of them. I remember like mailing in my application. I don't even think it was online at that point. So I've always done that. I was like, much like Rosa, I was on my school newspaper and just kind of always sought out opportunities. But it was during COVID when like we were all just home a lot. I had just had my first daughter. I was teaching online, and a lot of the kids weren't coming to my Zoom classes. So I would just sit there and wait and hope that kids would show up. And so I was filling that time. I was like, oh, well, might as well do something while I'm sitting here waiting. And so I started tinkering around with the idea that was Up in Flames. And I mean, I think a lot of us got some clarity during COVID of like just being home. And I was like, if this is something I want to do, this might be a good time to give it a shot. And I was lucky that it did work out. Yeah.
That's great. I swear almost every author I've talked to said either during COVID, they wrote their first book or they had time to pursue something. So that was, I think, a kind of, I guess, a bright spot for a lot of authors, because it is something that's a solitary thing for the most part, as is.
Yeah. Definitely.
Absolutely. So going back to the book, Rosa, at least in the beginning of the book, she doesn't want people at school to find out who she really is. And it's something that, Ramon and Ramon's brother, like, don't really understand. They're like, oh, well, it's okay now. Like, schools are desegregated, but it was complicated. Kind of talk about how that time period was complicated despite Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances to this. And this like was probably the most challenging detail of the book, and especially since it is such a big focus. For Mexicans specifically, and I get into a little bit of this in her community organizing meetings, but Mexicans were legally classified as white. They were not like legally designated as people of color, but they were often treated like people of color. In not so positive ways, but they had no recourse to challenge it, because like they're like, well, the law says you're white. Like, how can you prove that you've been discriminated or beaten by the police or been, conspired against in your legal case? And so there was just a lot of like nuance to the way it was approached. So like legally, I believe Rosa could have attended these white high schools regardless. I don't think in high school segregation was ever legally required in Arizona, but we did it anyway. So like we used to have George Washington Carver High School, which was Phoenix's black high school, that we sent our black students to. And a lot of schools had Mexican schools within schools. So they had classrooms that were just for the Mexican kids. And they said it was because of like language deficiencies. But it didn't matter if they spoke Spanish or not, or if they were proficient. So there was like a lot of just complexities of like, we did it in different ways in different communities. And it was just like hard to prove the ways that it was challenging. And it was really hard to capture that because it was so different based off different schools. And I'm sure for different people, like I looked at historical yearbooks for both North and South Phoenix or South Mountain High School, this research. And like there were mixed populations. And I wonder what their experiences were like. Like there were people like Rosa doing this thing. And I don't feel like I ever learned their stories like in school. And so I just really love to know more about like, so that's the kind of was the goal of Rosa. But it was happening.
What is the message you hope readers take away?
That there is no singular path to change. You know, yes, we have these catalyzing moments that people organize around, but there's a lot of like steps afterwards, and there's a lot of grief, and there's a lot of challenges, and there's backward steps. So it takes not only like the emotion that comes after like those big moments, but it takes resilience, it takes teamwork, it takes like unlearning things that you thought you knew about the world around you and like unpacking it. A lot of the people in Rosa's life are meant to like symbolize the different approaches. So like Ramon and Juliet are like the optimism of like, we'll go to a dance together and like then everyone will be so moved. And like, yeah, I'm sure that happens. Like these demonstrations do go as planned. And then we have Rosa's parents who are more of like the assimilation perspective of like, we got to play by their rules and get in, and then we'll make change further down the road, which again, probably has its merits too. And then we have Marco, who's really angry for very justified reasons and wants to like burn the system down, which again has its place. And then we have her community group that's kind of trying to educate people and do like the grassroots work. And Rosa kind of comes in at the center of all of that and takes pieces of that to kind of make her mark.
Yeah. What are some of the tropes, the themes readers can expect as well?
Yeah, it's got a lot of forbidden romance, as you might expect from Romeo and Juliet. We have Ramon and Juliet, but Rosa also has a romance of her own that toes that line. It's got some hints of best friend's brother, and then it's coming of age, but it's angry, so I call it coming of rage. Yeah, and it's just a lot of that, like hope in the darkest times and fighting for your hope, even when it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. It's technically a young adult book, but I think this is something that adults would love. I know I certainly did. What do you hope young people in particular will learn from this?
That your voice matters, even when it feels like it doesn't, that you can find your people, you can find your cause, and you can find your way forward. And I think something that like is very challenging for young people right now is like the value of effort, of trying hard and failing and trying again. With AI and just all these things that come together very seamlessly sometimes, I think we sometimes undervalue the benefit of like trying your best and like learning from mistakes and then trying over again. I think there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, definitely. Why YA books? Like, why did you want to write specifically young adult books?
I think a part of my personality will always be 17, so there's that. But also I taught 8th grade for 8 years, and I just like I see the impact of a good book. I see the impact of like when a message really sinks in, or when a student sees their culture, their perspective represented for the first time. So I think that's really powerful. I love engaging with young readers, even though I'm no longer in the classroom. I do 5 to 6 school visits a year, and that to get my fix. And I just think like, obviously it's cliche, but they're our future, and like I want to engage them in conversations that will benefit us all, and hopefully help them make meaning of their existence.
I love that. And we all remember the books that we read in middle school or elementary school that got us hooked into reading. Do you have any YA books or books you read when you were younger that you're really looking forward to reading to your daughters?
Yeah, I've been recollecting the Dear America series.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is like why I like historical fiction. Okay, I was obsessed with those books.
So I loved those with like the little hardcover and the satin bookmarks.
And they had the satin bookmark.
So fancy.
I see TikTok videos and Instagram things all the time about those Dear America books. I just need to go buy some of them, I think.
I've been looking for them in thrift stores and like hunting them down. I bought some online for the research for my next project. But I love those. That's definitely where my historical fiction fixation started. And then Rosa's been comped as Esperanza Rising for teen readers.
Okay.
And so I just reread that. I listened to it on audio, and the audio was amazing. And it was just as good as I remembered it in sixth grade.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that. So I feel like I've been also like stalking you on Instagram for the last couple months, ever since I knew I was going to interview you. So I always see your stories and your Instagram stories, and you write a lot in the library. Kind of tell me about your relationship with the library and why it's such a great place for you to kind of just like go and find your focus.
Yeah, I love libraries. My home library is Civic Center, and my family goes there at least twice a week.
The Scottsdale one?
The Scottsdale
Oh,
one.
that's such a nice library.
It's so good. They do great youth programming. So actually, a year between my current job and teaching, I was a stay-at-home mom for a year. And we went there every other day, and they do like a stuffy story time where the stuffies get to stay the night.
Oh.
And we pick up pictures the next day.
Oh my God, can I do that?
It was so cute. Yeah, we still have all the pictures like hanging.
That's
there.
adorable.
Yeah. They do a story time with mini horses where you can go and read to a mini horse, like actually inside the library. It's wild. So I love libraries. And then I actually this past summer just accepted a residency at the Chandler Library. So I am there 16 hours a week. And they just asked me to write there, which is great. I've never had 4 hours of uninterrupted time to write. I do consultations with emerging writers to talk about anything related to like craft or their publishing journey or anything like that. And then I also do 2 educational programs a month.
That's so cool. What has that experience been like so far?
It's been great. I love it. I split my time between the Basha branch and the downtown branch, and people can view my events or book consultations online. And I've done sessions on like publishing Q&A. And then I just this past week did a retelling workshop. Both my books are retellings. So I've done this session with schools a lot, but I walk them through like, what is a retelling? And then how could you go about writing your own? And then my next couple ones, I'm doing a write-in and like tips for just like setting a vibe to feel creative. So it's been fun. I'm loving it.
Yeah. What is a retelling?
A retelling is when you take either like a classic story or one that's like ingrained in our cultural memory and add your own spin to it. Okay. So Rosa is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. My first book is actually a critical retelling of Gone with the Wind, where I took some of the key themes that I think are still relevant and meaningful today and tried to imbue them in a modern setting, but I also tried to challenge some of the components that are obviously problematic and no longer fit where our society is at today. But they are everywhere. I think my love affair with retelling started with Lion King, which is based off Hamlet, which not everyone knows. And yeah, I think they're fascinating ways to like engage with like books that have stood the test of time, but also make them more relevant to modern readers, and then like interrogate, okay, these books are like still really popular, but they're problematic, and like how can we have a conversation about that? So,
what if you had to pick a book to do a retelling on? Like, what is your dream retelling that you haven't already done?
Yeah, I was like, Gone with the Wind was definitely mine, and I love like when they're super niche, or like you don't even have to do a book. Like people are doing like songs. Like Taylor Swift has a lot of like songs that people have written books off of.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, I guess Wicked isn't.
Yeah,
it's kind of a retelling.
It is, yeah.
But I guess a lot of people use the term fan fiction, which is similar to retelling, but not at the same time. I guess Wicked would be more of like a fan fiction because it was expanding on something as opposed to retelling.
Yeah, I think they're still considered retellings, but the difference between Wizard of Oz was in the public domain, so you could take those actual characters. Like Romeo and Juliet, I could have used those same characters if I wanted to, because Shakespeare, the copyright has expired. We all have access to the ideas.
That makes sense.
Gone with the Wind has not expired, so I couldn't use any of like the terms. I just had like kind of nudge, nod, nods to all of it. So you can do both. It just depends on where it is. Like Gatsby recently entered the public domain, so before you could write Gatsby retellings, it just had to be really subtle. Your readers had to do a lot of the work, but now you can use Gatsby and Daisy and Tom Buchanan however you want.
What are some other retellings? You mentioned The Lion King. What are some others that you've really loved?
The one that inspired me to try my own was it's called Anna K, and it's by Jenny Lee, and it is an Anna Karenina retelling for YA, featuring like Korean heiresses in New York City. It's like Gossip Girl Anna Karenina, and I was like, Anna Karenina is dense. So I was like, if they can make that relevant, like fun and cool, like you could do that with anything. So I think that one's really good. There's one by Tiffany Jackson, that's a Carrie retelling, but it's told like through a podcast. I listened to it in audio, and it was amazing. Cool. It was like chilling.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just like there's a lot you can do with it for sure.
What are some of the other books you love? What are some of the genres that are like your go-to?
I read a lot of historical. I read a lot of romance. Most of my books need to have like some sort of love arc in there. And then I love like Latin-inspired fantasies. I recently just recorded like a webinar with Sandra Proudman, who just wrote this really cool Zorro retelling that's set in like Alta California, 1860s, I think. But it's called Salvacion. It's about like a magic salt, but also like a girl Zorro. And I just think it was really good.
Yeah. That is so cool.
Yeah.
So how did you initially get published? Going back to Up in Flames, your first book.
Yes. So I am what's called traditionally published. So I signed a contract with a Big Five publisher. I started the process by finding a literary agent. And I did that the old-fashioned way, just querying with your query letter and then like a 10-page sample of a completed and polished manuscript. I queried for about 4 to 5 months before I found my agent, which I must have just had the right place, right time, because I've heard from other writer friends that that's relatively quickly for finding an agent. And she and I revised Up in Flames together for a few months, and then we went out on submission where she was pitching it to publishers. And Up in Flames sold at auction to my current editor, and it was a 2-book deal, so they got Up in Flames and Rosa.
Wow, that is so cool. So you submitted to the agent a 10 pages of the manuscript. So your manuscript was written.
It was done, and it had been through multiple revisions with like friends and family and myself. And she, like, after she read the first 10 pages, she asked to see the whole thing. So she had read the whole book by the time she offered to be my agent.
And is that like typically would they have to read the whole book before they offer to be the agent? Yeah, they're not going to just like say yes, even though, because they'd have to read the whole book. That makes sense.
I think for nonfiction there might be some exceptions, but if you're writing fiction, yes, they're going to want to see the whole thing.
What would your advice be for people who would like to be where you are right now, and that is, written 2 books, working on number 3?
To read a lot, read within your genre and read widely, to find a way to join an online community that feels healthy and helpful to you. I think right now publishers want to see you have some sort of presence online, but also don't feel like you have to do things that drain you. Like I'm not good at making TikToks. I don't enjoy it, so I don't do it. But like I'm on Instagram, and like I like interacting with readers there. And I've actually found like a lot of writer friends there. So like that has helped me just like to have someone to be like, are you feeling this too? Or like what's going on here? So I do think you need some sort of presence, but just find the way that's sustainable. And just to write badly. Your first draft is just for you, and it can be a mess, but like get it on paper. You can't edit the blank page. So like
that's really good advice. Did you have to do all of your research before you started writing?
Research on which topic?
On this, like for this book, like the historical research. Did you do all of that and then you started writing, or did you kind of do both at the same time?
Yeah, it varied in waves. So I would say my first draft was mostly just like the story, and I would leave myself notes like insert historical detail here.
Gotcha, yeah.
So it was a very like bland, like without much setting. Because then I had a better idea of what I needed to go looking for, because you can get overwhelmed with like all the data that's out there and all the stories. And so I would say like with each draft and revision, I uncovered like more historical richness with that, and that worked well for me. I don't know how other historical fiction writers do it. But my next novel is also historical fiction. I find myself doing something similar. So that's just get the bones of the story on it, and then you can kind of add the embellishments and historical nuances later.
Is there anything else you want to impart on our listeners or readers as they listen to this conversation and pick up the book?
That's a really good question. There's a lot. I encourage you all to like dig into the history of your own community, whether that's here in Phoenix or whether you're somewhere else. There's a lot of history everywhere that I just don't feel like gets captured in the mainstream, and sometimes you have to be really intentional about it. And then a constant goal of mine is to always read diversely. So like seek out other authors of color, people whose perspectives are different from you. There's just so much richness to be captured. And especially in this political time, it's really important to be reading and reading critically. And I think that's imperative for young people.
Yeah, definitely. I forgot to ask you this, but this is not a difficult question. What is you talked about coffee, and I see you post also on Instagram about coffee. What is your like go-to coffee order? Like what is your coffee that you're making every day?
I love, well, I don't know, though I can't make it yet. I love a shaken espresso. It's like my drink for the summer. My kids have like one of those Melissa and Doug's like play coffee, and they are like, "Mommy, here's your shaken espresso." And I was like, "Oh, good Lord, I must be doing that way too much." But yeah,
shaken espresso.
Yeah, it's got that zing that it really needs to get me focused.
And you also need like espresso. Like I like cold brew, but then it's like there's something about espresso shots. Are you like 3 shots?
I don't
ask
questions.
You're like, just give it to me.
Just hit me up.
Yeah.
No, whatever's standard.
Whatever's
But I like the fun flavors. Like the horchata seems to be the flavor of the summer.
Yeah.
And like I am a big horchata person, so I've really been enjoying that. Or like honey espresso is really nice. So yeah, just give me something fun. Make it feel interesting.
I love it. And here we obviously need that. We need the iced. Yeah. We need the iced espresso. Now I want one.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah,
all right.
We're gonna need it.
Well, Hailey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
So
for
Rosa,
having me.
by any other name, out now. It's young adult, but you hope, of course, adults will pick this up as well, because I do think it's great for adults.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.